Alright, team, so we're back, of course, talking about some Final Fantasy VII Remake. And initially with today's video, I was wanting to look at this piece of concept art we got for Nibelheim out of the Material Ultimania. And in doing that, it made me go back and look at the flashback segments we got within Remake Part 1, where we got to see Nibelheim. And to be honest, we've already got a pretty good look at it, because I initially wanted to look at that concept art and kind of break it down, and over here's the inn, over here's the item shop, right over here would be Tifa's house, things like that, but we've kind of already seen all that, so I thought we'd look at that piece of concept art, which I keep calling a key art, by the way, when I'm recording. If I call it a key art throughout the video, I apologize. So I want to take a look at that, but also just kind of look at everything we've seen of Nibelheim so far, and to be honest, we got quite a bit. So first up, we're going to take a look at that concept art, and people pointed out on Reddit and stuff how it kind of has a creepy vibe to it, which I can agree with. It is also a picture taken at night, so that kind of adds to that quote-unquote creep factor. But there are some creepy things about Nibelheim, right? With the Shinner Manor, what's going on there, the Mount Nibel reactor, that shit's, there's monsters and pods up there and shit. At first glance, Nibelheim looks like this quaint little village town, but we know, because of the original game, that there's a lot more going on than meets the eye, a lot more under the surface. I think they capture that really well with this concept art. And I suppose we'll take a quick look at this concept art. So for starters, right here on the left would be the inn, right directly across from the well. We have over here, which should be the item shop, and there seems to be an additional building right here. It's kind of hard to see, it's not the best quality picture. And in the original game, it goes the inn, then the item shop. There's not this additional building, so I don't know exactly what this is. And which would put this being Cloud's house over here. But obviously, if you take a look at it, this is like a 2-3 story building. Cloud's house is not. There's multiple houses within Nibelheim, multiple buildings that have 2 to 3 floors to them. Cloud's house is specifically a single story house. And once we get to the flashback cutscene, you'll see that there's actually multiple additional buildings with the remake version of Nibelheim, so maybe that's what this is, and Cloud's house is further to the right. I just initially took this as Cloud's house because his is directly across from the item shop. And if you look beyond the well right here, you can see there's a split in between these buildings, so I assumed at first that was the path to the Shinner Manor, but it might not be. Now, if we hop back to the Nibelheim flashback we got at the beginning of Remake, we get to see Nibelheim from the perspective of a very young Cloud. I think it's pretty safe to assume he's walking out of his house. So when Cloud walks out of his house, what we're looking at right here is the inn over here, and then we have this tiny building that did not exist in the original game. In the original game, again, it was the inn and the item shop, damn near touching. They were right side by side. So we have pretty much all this is kind of new in some way. They might have made the item shop into this tiny little shack that's kind of connected to the inn. And if that is the case, if this is the item shop, then all this right here is extra. I don't know what all this is exactly. And before we continue, I probably should have done this earlier in the video, but this is Nibelheim in the original FF7. Right here is the inn. This is obviously the well that Tifa and Cloud talk on. This is the item shop, as you can tell, they're side by side, damn near touching like I was talking about. And you can see it's like a 2-story building or whatever. Here's the path to the Shinner Manor up here. This is Cloud's house. This is Tifa's house, and this is just it's called Nibelheim House. It's also referred to as siblings house or something like that. And we also have these buildings down here to the south on the image, and this is the part of Nibelheim we've never really got to see before. We're about to take a look at it with the flashback, which again, as I always talk about, is something that excites me when it comes to the remake project, is taking these static images that we used to walk on top of in the original game and fully realizing them into 3D, and we're going to get to see parts of locations that we never ever got to see before. So continuing on with our POV shot, so to speak, whenever Cloud turns to the left, that's when we get to see parts of Nibelheim that we've never got to see before. Technically, these buildings are new, but at the same time, they also kind of aren't. They've kind of always been there. We've just never seen them. So taking a look at this new perspective of Nibelheim, we can see this building to the south has a barn door to it, essentially. There's also a second floor to it, and this looks like a set of stairs we could probably walk up with our character. When we get to Nibelheim, we could probably take Cloud up those stairs, and maybe to the second floor. Maybe we can go into this building, who knows. And we have this other kind of barn building back here or something. As we turn a little bit more to the left of this barn house, we can see this random water tower thing that obviously we didn't get to see in the original game. We have this downhill part right here. This leads to what is the Nibelheim house or the sibling house as we looked at earlier. Obviously little Tifa, and that puts Tifa's house over here to the left and Cloud's house over here to the left somewhere. And continuing even further to the left and a little bit closer to where Tifa and the other kids are, we get to see again downhill over here is what it should be the Nibelheim house. But if you look in the background, there appears to be a house that's not a part of the Nibelheim house. This looks like it's further back somewhere, which would be a completely brand new house again. That'd also probably make this Tifa's house, potentially. Not entirely sure. Her house could be a little bit further to the left. If this isn't Tifa's house, again, it's another brand new house. After the Mako Reactor 1 flashback on Nibelheim, we get a brief scene where Cloud remembers Nibelheim being on fire and looking at Sephiroth within the fire. It's kind of hard to tell exactly where Cloud's at in Nibelheim, but we can kind of break it down because he has the water tower behind him and he's looking at Sephiroth. which based on the original game would put Cloud kind of about right here, because we get the Sephiroth fire scene when Sephiroth's standing somewhere around here. And we see whenever Cloud's standing within the fire almost, and the water tower's behind him, there's like a 2 or 3 story building on fire to his left, our right when we're looking at the scene, which would probably be the inn. So this, of course, is the scene I'm talking about. You can see the water tower behind Cloud, and to the right over there should be the inn. And again, right in front of him, however far away it is, should be Sephiroth. We do get to see some other houses and buildings burning within the flashback, but we don't know what these are because it's super zoomed in. They could be some of the locations we know from the original game, the inn, the item shop, whatever, but they could also just be some of the random newer buildings in Nibelheim on fire. We also get to see this building on fire, and we can kind of decipher what this might be based on the initial flashback we looked at, because whenever Cloud walks out of his house and turns to the left, we actually get to see multiple white picket fences. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's not the one across the way, the newer building, the one that's south of Nibelheim that we've never seen before. I'm going to assume that the building we're looking at that's on fire is whatever house the fence to the left belongs to. Whether that's Tifa's house or Cloud's house is kind of hard to say because we don't exactly know how big the houses are in Nibelheim. Also, the fence across the way is, for the most part, a relatively nice-looking fence, not really beat up, and the one to the left is beaten up, missing boards and things. And when we look at the building that's on fire in that flashback, we can see that the fence is pretty beat up. From here, we get the scene of Cloud and Sephiroth talking in the alleyway near the beginning of the game, and we do get to see Cloud's house burning from his perspective, and we get confirmation that in Remake it is still a 1-story house, but we also get to see that he does have the white picket fence at the front of his house, so the house we looked at earlier could be his. The house kind of looks like a 2-story house in that scene. But this could also be a perspective thing where, because of the angle, it looks like a bigger 2-story house, but it could just be Cloud's. I don't know. Now, going forward, we have the scene where it's young Tifa, young Cloud talking at the water tower in the middle of Nibelheim. And it's important from a perspective thing to know that directly behind Cloud's back, the bigger building is the inn. We need that for, context. So looking at this image right here, knowing the way that Cloud is facing with the inn to his back, should mean that this 1-story house right here is his, which would also mean that the bigger house right next to it should be Tifa's, assuming it's just like the original game, they were side by side, which would also mean that the house we looked at earlier with the very young Tifa that had the pipe on the roof is probably not her house, probably something new. This image right here, of course, and based on the layout of Nibelheim, the house behind her cannot possibly be the one right next to Cloud, so it's got to be something new. Looking at this image with the knowledge in mind that, again, the inn is directly behind Cloud's back, would put the inn somewhere over here. This is one of these buildings over here. Somewhere is the item shop. I don't exactly, again, know which one it would be. This building right here would be that southern building that we didn't get to see in the original game, but we got to see with the flashback earlier. That had, the barn door and the stairs leading up to the second floor. And all throughout this flashback scene, you can see in the background additional buildings that did not exist in the original game. It's not really worth pausing every frame to point out a new building, but it does seem like they're definitely expanding Nibelheim, which I keep calling Midgar in my takes. I don't know if I've said that in the video or not, but it does seem like they're expanding Nibelheim a lot bigger than it was in the original game. And though it's not directly Nibelheim, we do get to see inside the Mount Nibel reactor with Tifa and her dead father. Thought it was worth pointing out. We don't necessarily need to break down the scene because it's just the inside of a reactor. There's really nothing to point out. And the last thing worth pointing out from Remake Part 1 was the dream or flashback that Cloud has where he's talking to his mom. You get to see the inside of Cloud's house. There's really not a whole lot to break down here. You kind of could look at maybe background items and objects and stuff like that if you wanted to. But the main thing worth pointing out for me is that there's actually a layout to this house, whereas in the original game, it was kind of all one big giant room. The bed was pretty much in the kitchen damn near. But as you can see right here with Cloud laying on the bed, he's actually in a bedroom and there's a doorway leading to the kitchen as opposed to what it was in the original game. But also in the scene back behind Claudia, you can see there's a doorway to another room. I'd assume it's probably her room. And also back here, it looks like you could almost turn to the right. There's more to the house this way. A hallway or something, a back door, who knows exactly. All I know is when it comes to Remake and we get to Cloud's house, I'm going to be searching every square inch of that house just for some lore, some backstory on his family. Maybe there's a picture of his dad. What does Cloud's dad look like? Because him and his mom look the exact fucking same. I think the last thing worth pointing out is the town itself, the way it looks. Because whenever we see the flashback of Cloud at very young first-person perspective, and he walks out of his house, we see that the ground in Nibelheim is sand. And I always took it as it was dirt. It wasn't paved roads, it was just kind of dirt roads going through Nibelheim. But it's more like sand, like a desert, or the wasteland around Midgar. It's especially weird, too, when you look at it from the world map perspective, where it's this open plains, grassy field area, mountain range. There's nothing deserty at all anywhere around Nibelheim. But apparently it looks like this, which I thought was kind of strange. Maybe it has something to do with Shinra. Maybe there's a lore reason to it. Maybe the Shinra Manor, or maybe the reactor on Mount Nibel having some sort of effect on the town, and maybe kind of killing the grass and everything around there, potentially. Similar to Midgar, of course. Anyways, dudes, that's pretty much the video. This ended up being a lot longer video than I planned, a lot longer recording process than I was planning, but I initially wanted to break down that concept art, and then I was like, why not just break down all of what we have with Nibelheim so far, and thus we have this long-ass video. Be sure to let me know if I missed anything like in the background that was worth pointing out in any of the scenes, but also if I missed anything Nibelheim related. Like, I'm pretty sure I gathered all the clips and images and flashback segments of Nibelheim, but I might have missed something. Also, listening back through the video, I caught myself saying Nibelheim and Nibelheim, which I believe Nibelheim is the proper way of saying it, but I've always read it as Nibelheim throughout my entire life. Similar to like Final Fantasy X, the protagonist's name, I always call him Titus, but it's supposed to be pronounced like Titus or something. Just one of those things. So the habit is hard to break. Anyways, my dudes, that is the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. We'll save days more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @dashingdavid. At my Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Low Gain or leave it like Cobain.